You think the early bird gets the worm? Elara Vance arrived 2 hours early, solved problems before they existed, and kept the entire department afloat. She wasn't just working, she was ghosting her way to the top. When her manager took the credit, Elara swallowed it, waiting for the one reward that mattered, the promotion. But when that promotion was abruptly and silently retracted, Elara didn't quit. She did something far more dangerous. She quietly logged out of her hustle, arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, and forced the entire company to reckon with the value of her silence. This is the story of how one woman's refusal to do extra exposed a toxic corporate hierarchy and landed her a VP title. The office was a deep, silent blue before dawn. Elara Vance, a woman woven from precise, quiet efficiency, arrived at 7:28 a.m. The time was less a measure of preparation and more a ritual of penance. The fluorescent lights hummed with a flat, indifferent energy, illuminating rows of vacant, anonymous desks. This was Elara's ghost hour, a private sanctuary of productivity, where she laid the foundation for the day's successes that always carried the name of her manager, Vivian Hayes. The work she did in this ethereal quiet was the true architecture of the department, the proactive problem-solving, the predictive analytics, the preemptive client communication. It wasn't in her job description, it was in her nature. Elara's feelings during this time were a complex weave of pride and deep, subterranean resentment. Her hands, dancing across the backlit keyboard, felt powerful, yet her spirit felt hollowed out, a vessel pouring its best content into another's cup. She often stared out the 30-second story window, where the city was just beginning to stir, a slow wash of orange and gray. Was this view worth the cost? She'd ask the empty glass. To be the unseen engine of another's ascent? Vivian Hayes would sweep in at 9:05 a.m., a whirlwind of high-end tailoring and perfectly curated enthusiasm, collecting the gilded summaries of Elara's work as if they were naturally occurring departmental triumphs. The unspoken contract was simple. Elara provided the substance, Vivian provided the spotlight. The days bled into years. Then came the meeting, the crisp, formal, celebratory invitation in her calendar. Vivian, smiling with a sudden brittle warmth, had offered her the coveted senior strategy lead promotion. The pay bump was substantial, the title prestigious. Elara felt a tectonic shift inside her chest, relief, validation, the slow blossoming of deserved recognition. She had accepted the feeling of stepping out of the shadow and into the sunlight. But 2 weeks later, the sunlight vanished. The email arrived at 6:15 p.m. on a Friday. Subject: Update regarding senior strategy lead role. The body was terse, clinical, and devoid of Vivian's personality. Due to unforeseen corporate restructuring and budget reallocation, the senior strategy lead position has been placed on indefinite hold. We appreciate your interest and look forward to your continued contribution in your current role. Elara read the words 3 times, the clinical language a sharp anesthetic to a profound spiritual wound. It wasn't the title she mourned. It was the retraction of value. The universe had briefly acknowledged her worth, only to snatch the mirror away. That night, Elara did not go home. She sat in the silent office until 10 p.m. The glow of her monitor was a cold reflection of her own face. Her inner landscape was a barren, windswept plain. I performed for validation. I received a debt. I will perform the contract now. The decision was a quiet, cold, surgical severance of her excess effort. The next Monday, Elara's routine fractured. At 7:28 a.m., the office remained dark and silent. Elara was still home, nursing a coffee cup, watching the local news, her mind finally unburdened by the need to preempt the day. At 9 a.m. precisely, Elara entered the office. Not a minute sooner. Her arrival now was marked by the subtle displacement of Vivian's carefully timed flow. Vivian was used to arriving at a desk pre-stacked with solutions. Now, she arrived at a desk stacked only with problems waiting for the 9 a.m. kickoff. Elara's work became a study in elegant minimalism. She performed the tasks outlined in her official job description meticulously. If the task required 3 steps, she executed 3 steps, never 4. Her emails were courteous, professional, and devoid of the helpful, value-added context that had previously made her indispensable. She answered direct questions. She never offered predictive solutions. The office atmosphere around her changed. It wasn't hostile, it was a vacuum. Vivian, initially puzzled, then annoyed, began to feel the shift immediately. Deadlines that were once quietly smoothed over now loomed. Minor client issues that Elara would have neutralized before they were even reported now flared into visible crises. Vivian, scrambling to fill the void of Elara's ghost work, found her own 60% workload had suddenly inflated to 120%. Her tailored enthusiasm frayed at the edges. Elara observed her manager's subtle panic with a distant, almost academic curiosity. There was no pleasure in the observation, only the quiet, immutable satisfaction of integrity restored. "This is what I am paid for," her efficiency seemed to whisper to the room. Nothing more. Nothing less. The weekly executive planning meeting was held on a Thursday in the glass-walled war room. This room was an intentional arena of transparency, a polished oval table reflecting the high-stakes city view, ensuring every gesture, every bead of sweat was visible. The atmosphere was a heavy composite of competitive posturing and suppressed anxiety. Elara, attending solely for the purpose of minutes, sat at a side auxiliary table. She was the silent sentinel, clothed in a tailored neutrality that perfectly masked the emotional fortress she had built within. The agenda moved like a slow-motion car crash toward Vivian's department update. Vivian Hayes, whose usual facade of control was now severely cracked by weeks of covering Elara's lost ghost work, was relying on aggression. A faint, almost imperceptible sheen of perspiration dotted her forehead. Vivian, frazzled but trying to project control, reached the section on recent operational friction. She couldn't contain her frustration, allowing the private issue to bleed into the public forum. "Frankly, the recent dip in preemptive crisis management is unacceptable," Vivian stated, her voice tight, a fraction too loud for the room's acoustics. She glanced pointedly at Elara, framing the issue not as a failure of management but a failure of subordinate dedication. "Elara, you used to have the Q3 reporting forecast on my desk by 8 a.m. every Tuesday. Why is that no longer happening? Why are we waiting until 11 a.m. for tasks you have historically performed outside your defined scope?" The air tightened around the question. It was a clear power play, a public accusation meant to shame Elara back into her old routine. Elara felt a cold, exquisite clarity. This was the opening she had waited for. She placed her pen down deliberately, the small click echoing sharply in the silence. She met Vivian's gaze, her face a serene mask of unflappable professionalism. "My contractual working hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Elara replied. Her voice was level measured, a calm force of fact in Vivian's storm of emotion. "The task you reference is not part of my official statement of work. I prioritize deliverables strictly according to departmental necessity and my job description. That report is completed and delivered promptly at 11 a.m., in line with its designated task completion window." Vivian recoiled slightly, blindsided by the clinical, unarguable defense. "But the promotion," she stammered, scrambling to reintroduce the concept of extrinsic motivation, the added responsibility that was meant to incentivize that level of dedication. Elara didn't hesitate. She delivered the final, devastating truth, her words stripped of all personal emotion, making the company's action the only focus. "The promotion was retracted," Elara stated, her voice flat, emotionless, an echo in the polished room. "My level of dedication adjusted to match the company's valuation of my excess contribution." A profound, sharp, collective silence fell over the executive table. Every department had instantly understood the implication. Elara had named the unspoken contract and declared it void. Across the table, at the head, sat Mr. Julian Thorne, the CEO. He was known for his silent observation, a man who spoke only when his words would shift the entire structure of the conversation. He had been reviewing quarterly data, but his pen stilled above the page, a minor, yet absolute signal of interruption. He slowly lowered the file, his eyes, deep and calculating, locked onto Elara. "Ms. Hayes," Mr. Thorne's voice was low, carrying a deep, unhurried authority that cut through the silence. "The senior strategy lead role, which was explicitly designed to handle the integration with our largest client, Nova Dynamics. It was rescinded." "Yes, Mr. Thorne," Vivian said, swallowing hard, her face now completely flushed with recognition of her public folly. "Restructuring." I allocated the budget myself. There was no restructuring, Mr. Thorne interrupted gently, but the gentle tone was the deadliest. He looked directly at Elara, ignoring everyone else, studying her calm, resolute posture, recognizing the core of the problem and the source of the solution. Elara Vance. My office. Now. Mr. Thorne's office was a study in controlled power. Walls of muted gray and dark mahogany, dominated by a breathtaking panoramic view of the entire city. It was the antithesis of the buzzing, fluorescent lower floors, a quiet space where decisions were made, not problems managed. Elara walked in, the fear she should have felt replaced by a strange, sharp clarity. She knew her value, and she knew her leverage. Mr. Thorne gestured to a soft leather chair. Sit, Elara. Tell me the truth about Nova Dynamics. Why have they been asking specifically for you by name on every communication that matters? Elara took a breath. I understood their business. I did the work necessary to predict their needs, not just fulfill their requests. I created the Q4 predictive model that Vivian presented last year. They trust the data they know I generated. Mr. Thorne nodded slowly. I see. And you were offered the senior strategy lead role, a role vital for Nova Dynamics retention, and it was pulled. Do you believe Ms. Hayes was protecting her own standing? Elara was quiet. It is the only logical conclusion for a retraction that defied the stated organizational need. Mr. Thorne leaned forward. Ms. Vance, Nova Dynamics is the anchor. If we lose them, the ship capsizes. They will not deal with Ms. Hayes anymore. Their trust is irrevocably with you. I need you to be their point of contact, their champion within this organization. I will not have my company held hostage by internal political posturing. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. I am offering you the role of Director of Client Strategy. This is a position 2 tiers above a manager. You will report directly to me. You will build a new team with full budget autonomy, dedicated solely to securing and expanding our top-tier client relationships. The offer was staggering, a jump that should have taken 5 years. But Elara held the quiet strength of her new self. Mr. Thorne, she said, her tone respectful but firm. I appreciate the offer and the sudden, profound valuation of my work. However, I am currently in the final stages of considering an external offer. The CEO did not flinch. This was the moment of true negotiation. He admired the confidence, the lack of immediate surrender. I expected as much, he said, a slight, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. Let's be direct. I will not lose Nova. I will not lose you. The external offer, I presume, is competitive. I will beat it. I will offer a compensation package 30% higher than the directorial maximum, stock options that vest within 18 months, and a mandate to completely restructure how we approach client relations across the board. You will have full executive support to pull resources from any existing department, including Ms. Hayes's, if you deem it necessary for expansion. He pushed a folder across the mahogany desk. Take the weekend. Consider this contract. I've never begged for talent before, Elara. You are the exception. Elara drove home that Thursday evening with 2 contracts on the passenger seat, 1 crisp folder from Mr. Thorne, and 1 neatly bound document from Arcadia Solutions. The Arcadia offer was titled VP of Product Integration. It was a clean, safe path, a clear mandate, a $10,000 higher starting base salary than even Thorne's initial figure, and a corporate culture known for its rigorous work-life balance. Arcadia represented the retreat, a chance to take her hard-won talent to a place that had already recognized her value and promised a future free of corporate shadows. She laid the 2 contracts on her dining table, side by side. The contrast was stark. Arcadia, the retreat, a life of peace. A clear boundary between self and work. A title already earned. Emotional cost, accepting that her time at the current firm was a loss, walking away from the fight. Thorne Industries, the conquest, a life of power. A mandate to build a kingdom and exact her professional revenge through overwhelming success. A contract that required her to wrestle with the very forces that had hurt her. Emotional cost, endless high-stakes politics, the risk of ultimate failure. Elara walked the city on Friday, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The silence of her apartment felt too loud. She pictured the Arcadia office. low-rise, airy, with sunlight filtering through a quiet campus. She pictured the people, kind, efficient, and without the shark-like hunger of Thorne's executives. "This is happiness," a voice whispered. A predictable, safe harbor. But then she remembered the CEO's gaze in the war room, the instant profound pivot from ignoring her to fighting for her. She saw the retraction email again, the clinical dismissal of her worth. Accepting Arcadia felt like admitting that the retraction had been final. It felt like validating Vivian's power to define her trajectory. On Saturday, she sat down with a legal pad and began modeling the two options, treating her own life as a complex systems problem. Arcadia, linear growth, guaranteed safety, but a finite cap on impact. She would be valued, but not feared. Thorne Industries, exponential growth, guaranteed chaos, but infinite impact. She would be valued and given the authority to revalue everyone around her. She realized the essence of Mr. Thorne's counteroffer wasn't just money, it was structural integrity. He wasn't just giving her a title, he was giving her the toolkit to dismantle the systemic flaw that allowed talented people to be marginalized. If she left, the flaw would remain. If she stayed, she could fix the machine from the inside, eliminating the possibility of another ghost hour for someone else. The decision crystallized late Sunday night. She was not a person built for a retreat. She was an architect. Her initial act of defiance was arriving at 9 a.m. Her final act would be stepping into the fire, not running from it. She would seize the power necessary to ensure her worth could never again be unilaterally dismissed. The risk was enormous, but the victory would be total. On Monday, she accepted Mr. Thorne's offer. The specifics of growth, Atlas Division. Her new office was deliberately placed on a different floor, the penthouse level, bathed in natural light. The aesthetic was one of transparency and forward momentum. Elara was no longer the architect of silence. She was the chief conductor of clarity. She began building her team, the Atlas Division, with surgical precision. The philosophy of Atlas was simple: reject reactive measures, embrace predictive modeling. She was hired not based on seniority, but on intellectual curiosity and a fierce commitment to data integrity. Elara immediately implemented the Nova Dynamics Protocol (NDP) as her division's core operating model. This was a preemptive risk assessment and strategy framework she had developed in her ghost hours. The NDP focused on identifying client pain points 6 months before they became crises, essentially turning client management from a cost center into a forecasting center. Her first major success was the retention and stabilization of Nova Dynamics, which immediately boosted the firm's stock value by 4%. Mr. Thorne used this success as the centerpiece of their next board meeting. Client expansion milestones. Securing Archon Technologies, Month 3. Archon, a massive competitor account, was in play. Elara bypassed traditional sales pitches, instead presenting Archon's executive team with an unsolicited, highly detailed predictive audit of their next 12 months. The audit revealed a blind spot that Archon's current agency had missed. This move was unprecedented. It sold confidence, not services. Archon signed a 2-year, 9-figure contract, crediting Elara's clairvoyant strategy. Stabilizing Viridian Global, Month 9. Viridian was a legacy client on the brink of divorce. They were high risk, high reward. Elara deployed a fully integrated Atlas team to perform a root cause analysis that pinpointed internal inefficiencies at the company, not external service failures. By recommending changes to the client structure based on her data, she saved the account and transformed the relationship into a deep strategic partnership. The mandate and the power shift with Vivian. Elara's director mandate allowed her to pull resources crucial for her expansion. This immediately brought her into a professional and mandatory dependency with Vivian Hayes' department. The dynamic was now reversed. Vivian needed to provide impeccable service to Elara, or risk having her best talent siphoned away. The first major power shift occurred when Elara requested Marcus Chen, Vivian's top data analyst, for the Archon account. Elara walked into Vivian's still-frazzled office. "Vivian, I need Marcus Chen moved to the Atlas Division roster, effective Monday. He will be critical for the Archon deployment." Vivian, momentarily stunned, attempted a weak resistance. "Elara, he's indispensable here. His departure will..." We'll expose the systemic reliance on individual talent that the Atlas division is designed to solve. Elara finished, her tone polite but final. Mr. Thorne has authorized the transfer. You will need to implement a redundancy plan, but the need is immediate. Vivian realized she was not being asked. She was being informed by a superior authority who happened to be the woman she had betrayed. The interaction was professional, chilly, and dictated entirely by the new flow of power. Vivian complied. The transaction was a formal acknowledgement of Elara's new orbit. The Atlas division's success, driven by these moves, saw the company's client base expand by 40% in just over a year. Within 18 months, Elara Vance was not just a successful director, she was a corporate legend. One afternoon, the CEO called Elara into his office again. This time the mood was different, a quiet reverence. Elara, Mr. Thorne began. The board approved it unanimously. It's a newly created role, reporting only to me, focusing entirely on growth and long-term organizational stability. I'm offering you the position of Executive Vice President of Strategic Development. Elara, now accustomed to the scale of her own success, accepted the VP role with a calm sense of inevitability. The next day, she found Vivian Hayes waiting outside her new, grander office. Vivian was dressed in a simple, well-worn suit, her usual corporate armor stripped away by time and professional stress. She looked exhausted, less like a manager and more like a woman carrying a heavy truth. Elara, do you have 5 minutes? Vivian asked, her voice low. Elara looked at her former manager, devoid of malice or triumph. Of course, Vivian. They sat in the quiet of the VP's office, the city sparkling below. I need to tell you about the senior strategy lead promotion, Vivian began, her eyes tracing a distant point on the window. I didn't pull it to keep you doing my work. Not exactly. I pulled it to stop you from failing. She explained the context. That role, the senior strategy lead, it was a poison chalice. The Nova Dynamics contract was secretly failing before you fixed it. That promotion was designed by the previous executive team to be a high-visibility scapegoat position. The moment you signed, you would have inherited a colossal mess, zero resources, and been held accountable by a hostile board for an inevitable, spectacular crash. They had already prepped your failure. Vivian looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. I was terrified of losing the results you generated, yes, but I was more terrified of seeing your career, the potential I always knew you had, destroyed by those political wolves. I didn't dare to tell you the truth because I needed your daily output to survive, and I thought if I pulled it clinically, you'd only be mad at me, not crushed by the company. The air was still. Elara had always sought the truth in data and logic, but this truth was messy, complex, and human. It wasn't simple betrayal. It was a flawed, selfish, yet protective act rooted in corporate fear. Elara, now the executive vice president, understood the pressures of that tier perfectly. She saw the younger, cornered Vivian in the woman before her. Thank you, Vivian, Elara said, her voice softening. She reached across the polished table and gently touched Vivian's hand. I accept your explanation. You chose to sacrifice my immediate trust to protect my long-term future. It was the wrong way to handle it, but I understand the fear that drove it. The confession was not a call for friendship, but for a mature, professional alliance. The great change in their relationship was its foundation in honesty and shared context. Elara knew the political landscape. Vivian knew the operational reality. Vivian, now free of the need to compete with or contain Elara, became her most loyal and effective strategic partner. She provided Elara with unvarnished, ground-level intelligence about political maneuvering and departmental morale, the kind of truth the VP rarely hears. Elara, in turn, used her VP authority to secure improved technology, better staffing, and organizational clarity for Vivian's department, ensuring its long-term stability. Their relationship evolved into a complex, unspoken partnership. Vivian was Elara's eyes and ears on the 32nd floor, and Elara was Vivian's shield and sponsor in the executive suite. They shared a respect forged in fire, a bond far stronger than the fragile pretense of the ghost hour. The ledger was balanced. The two women, who had once operated in the rigid hierarchy of manager and subordinate, met as equals in the complex, often terrifying landscape of corporate power, finally clear of the silent blue shadow of the ghost hour.